everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts, and today is day 4 of my Halloween card series. I'll be creating an A7 card with 3 matching tags. So for the tags, I'm using a Tim Holtz die. I'm also going to pull in a Miss Ink stencil, I think that's called Jitters. And then I will be using this Impression Obsession graveyard die. I use this a couple times for my Halloween card series already. It is one of my most used dies for Halloween. And then I had to purchase the new Tim Holtz Halloween collection this year, so I will be using all 3 of the monsters from that monster die set. I will be using a Lawn Fawn fence. I'm also going to use this gravestone, and I honestly don't remember what company this is from. I've had this die for years. If I can find it, I will link it down below, as well as all the supplies that I'm using today. I'm going to use a sentiment from this Hero Arts potion bottle stamp set, and then I think that's it. I will pull in a couple distress inks here and there to basically color in my images. Because these are die cuts, I wanted to give them a little bit more interest by stenciling a pattern onto their clothing. So I'm taking this Miss Ink Jitters stencil and my die cuts. So I have 2 vampires and then 2 tags, one larger one and one smaller one. And I'm going to tape those to the back of the stencil using my Scotch tape here. And this is just going to hold them down while I blend my ink on top. You can use pixie spray if you like, but I definitely think that the Scotch keeps it pretty secure. Now there are a lot of openings on this stencil, so if you used a makeup brush or a blender brush, you might lift up those itty bitty rows and get ink where you don't want it to. So whenever I have intricate stencils like this, I prefer to use an ink dauber and pounce my ink on top as opposed to blending it with like circular motions. This is going to ensure that nothing is seeping underneath the areas I don't want them to. And using a foam applicator is also going to apply more ink than a brush. So I want this to be pretty bold, so using the finger dauber is going to help me with that as well. So here I'm just inking up all of the red pieces, and I'm going to do the same thing with the other die cuts. And I'm trying to do all the colors at once just to save time here. So I'm going to remove the Scotch tape, and here you can see how they turned out. They're pretty cool. I thought that the stencil just added a little something because they are pretty plain otherwise. Alright, so I am going to spray this stencil with my Distress Water Sprayer to clean it up and move on to my next color. You want to make sure to clean the back of your stencil as well, because the ink will seep onto your glass mat and underneath your stencil, so make sure that's good and clean before moving on to the next color. This time I will be doing green, and I did not do Frankenstein because I wanted to do his clothing instead of his actual body, so I'm just going to do the 2 tags here. And the distress ink I'm using now is peeled paint. I forgot to mention that I used Rusty Hinge for the red pieces. And I'm just doing the same thing here, just with a green finger dauber. I have a pack of 50 of these, and I organized them with light colors and dark colors, so I do have a dauber for light green and dark green, but otherwise I don't have a dauber for a specific distress ink. So I'm removing those 2 tags, and here you can see how it turns out. It's not perfect because I didn't add the same amount of pressure throughout the entire tag. So there are some areas that have more heavy ink and then others that are more light. But I thought that was kind of cool. It made it look old, so I was okay with that. So I'm going to move on to the gray tag now. And this color I'm using is Weathered Wood, so it's kind of like a blue-gray color. And I just finished that off camera because it's the exact same thing. I'm going to show you Frankenstein's outfit. So for his pants, I cut it from gray cardstock, and then his shirt I cut from purple. So I'm using the Weathered Wood for his pants, and I believe this is Wilted Violet. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those from the stencil, and I just think that this effect is really cool. It adds a nice little texture. So I can now work on my card panel now, and this is a piece of watercolor paper cut to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. The reason why I went with watercolor paper is because it's easier to blend distress inks with, and I typically go for my oxides, but I wanted a more vibrant sky, and the oxide inks turn more chalky while the distress inks are a little bit more brighter, so that's what I decided to do today. The first color that I laid down was Salty Ocean. This one I think is Stormy Sky. And then I think I will add either Chip Sapphire or Faded Jeans. Let's see. I think that was Faded Jeans. And then I am going to pull in some black soot just to darken it a bit because I do want this to be a night sky. And I am using my Picket Fence Studios blender brushes to apply the ink. And I'm going over each color twice just to make sure everything blends pretty nicely. The blues are fairly similar, so they weren't too difficult to blend. So I think this is where I decided that I did want to add that black soot. It's just going to add some darker color to the top of this panel. And then I'm pretty happy with how this ink blending turned out. I'm going to add some water splatters to the background, and because I used watercolor paper, it's going to lift more ink than, let's say, a Nina panel typically would. And I'm also going to add some pearlescent watercolor by Gonzai Tombi. I've been doing this to pretty much all of my ink blended panels lately. I love the shine, and especially for night skies, they kind of look like stars. So I'm pulling in that Jitter stencil one more time, and I thought it would be cool to add the same texture to the sky. So I'm going to attach the panel to the back of the stencil with my tape again. And I'm going to start with a blender brush just because this is such a huge area. I thought it would be easier. But as you can see, the stencil is shifting and I wasn't applying enough ink. So I'm going to switch over to that finger dauber. You can use a Tim Holtz, what are they called? Blender tool. But I don't have any of those, so I just use my finger dauber. And I'm going through each section of the sky with the same color ink that's beneath it. So I will use all 3 or 4 blues again. I don't think I used the black soot. I think I just used the 3 blues. And I did not add too much pressure. I just wanted this to be a subtle effect. So you can see it, but it's not super in your face. So I die cut that Lawn Fawn fence from some black cardstock and the Impression Obsession Graveyard from a dark gray cardstock. And because they're sized to fit on an A2 card, I did have to extend the borders, and you'll see that in just a second. But I wanted to see what this card layout was going to look like, so I'm laying out my 3 monsters. And I do like how they look, so I'll go ahead and extend those borders. So I just cut out another fence. And I will attach the 2 fences together with my art glitter glue, and I'll do the same thing with the graveyard. Now you do see a line where the 2 borders connect, but I knew my vampire was going to cover that line, so it's not a huge deal. Okay, so now I'm just kind of laying them on top of each other, and I'm going to trim down my fence and add some foam tape behind it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the graveyard. So both of the borders are popped up, and I like this because I can tuck my Frankenstein underneath the fence. I will have to trim my graveyard at the bottom to make sure it's nice and straight. And then I will pull my die cuts back in. I'm first going to give my Frankenstein an outfit, so here are his pants. I'll attach those with my art glitter glue, and I'll do the same for his purple shirt. And I wanted to give him black hair, so I'm going to take a fine liner and just color his hair in black. You can use a Copic marker if you want. but I wanted this to be black, and the darkest color I have in my Copics is C8, so it's still technically a gray. So I just decided to go with my fine liner. So I'm arranging my gravestone and my monsters. I wanted to give my vampire a black hand and a black face. So that's completely unnecessary. It's just little details like this make me happy. So you could also color it in instead. You didn't have to die cut it separately and paper piece it, but all right, so for my sky, I added a couple bats. The two smaller bats come with the monsters, I think, and then that larger bat came with the gravestone. So all of my monsters have foam tape behind them, so they're going to be nice and raised from this panel. I didn't add the texture to the skeleton. I kind of wish that I did, but I didn't have a light enough gray. I felt like the weathered wood would be too dark, so I kind of just left him bright white. I'm attaching the gravestone with my art glitter glue, and I'll do the same for the 3 bats. Now off camera I added the words RIP to the gravestone just to add, again, more detail, but I don't think I left that on the video because I did it after I finished the card. But I am going to add a sentiment to this panel. So I'm using a Happy Halloween sentiment from a Lawn Fawn stamp set. And I'm going to white heat emboss it onto the gravestones. And I love how this sentiment pops with the white embossing powder. And if I would have thought this through more, I would have embossed this before attaching it to my card panel. So to avoid warping, you're going to see I am constantly pulling back the heat tool and then bringing it back when it's nice and hot. So it did curl a little bit, but I just used my hands to uncurl it, and it ended up being fine. So I'm going to attach this panel onto my A7 card base, and then that's pretty much going to complete the card. I will embellish with some silver rhinestones by Trinity Stamps. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm trying to look for them, I guess. And I love that these kind of look like stars. And I like that there's different sizes. I thought about using these black embellishments by Trinity Stamps, but I don't think I ended up using them. Maybe I did. I don't remember. No, I took them off. I am attaching them down with my art glitter glue, and whenever I work with embellishments, I tend to glue them in a diagonal. And that is going to complete my card. So I had those extra monsters, and I really wanted to create individual tags for them. So I cut that Tim Holtz tag die from some more watercolor paper, and I'm going to ink blend for my first tag milled lavender and wilted violet. So this will give me a nice purple sky for my Frankenstein. And I think I'm only going to show you 1 or 2 tags just because I did do them all the same way. I just used different distress inks. I think I actually pull in some black soot, yes, to add some darkness to the bottom of the tag. I didn't add it to the very bottom because I knew I was going to be adding another fence and graveyard. I'm going to add some water splatters, and I'll also add the pearlescent watercolor splatters. Okay, and then I will pull in my fence and graveyard. And just like I did with the card, I'm going to layer them on top of each other. And I think I only popped up the graveyard and I glued the fence flat. And this is some U-line foam tape that I'm using here. And once that's attached, I will flip the tag over and trim off the excess. I am going to use that leftover border for my second tag. Okay, so I like how that looks. I'm going to now assemble my Frankenstein. He reminded me of like a paper doll. Back when I scrapbooked, I created a lot of paper dolls with my Cricut, so this kind of brought me back to those times. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll color in his hair with a black fine liner. So I planned on adding the small tag on top, and that's where I'm going to add my sentiment. So I tested out the other two monsters, but I did like the Frankenstein the best. So I'm going to grab the Happy Halloween from the Hero Arts Potion bottle stamp set, and that fit perfectly on that tag. And then for the back of the tag, because you could see the ink blending through it, I thought that I would matte the tag with those green, red, and gray ink blended tags that we worked on at the beginning of this video. So for my second tag, I'll just show you the ink blending. I think this is peeled paint? No. What I'm using right now is peeled paint. The lighter green is an olive color. I will have it linked down below because I can't think of it at the top of my head, but I'm going to also add black soot to the bottom of this panel, and this will be the sky for my vampire. And then I created the same blue background that I created on my card for my skeleton. So I used the same inks for that tag. So I'm going to spray the water splatters at the same time for these two tags and also add my pearlescent watercolor splatters. So you can create a whole bunch of tags at once, kind of doing them assembly line style like this. I stamped out the Happy Halloween sentiment onto the red tag for the vampire, and I did pick your poison for the skeleton. And I did cut some hole reinforcers from the same Tim Holtz tag set, just to make sure that these tags are going to not rip at the top where I'm going to add my twine. So for the Frankenstein, I wanted to give him an accessory because my vampire and my skeleton had a bat. So I'm going to give him a little die cut cat, which is from a Sherry Lynn die. So I color coordinated even those hole reinforcers. I'm really happy with how these tags turned out. I will sell the vampire and the Frankenstein with the A7 card, but I'm going to keep the skeleton because my husband's birthday is October 20th, and every year so far I've gotten him a Halloween themed gift, so I thought that this tag would be cute to put on the present I give him. So I am going to add some more reinforcers to the back of these tags, and the stenciling on the background is subtle enough where you can write a message with a black pen. And then to adorn the top of the tags, I'm going to use some black and white twine that I doubled up, and I'm going to attach the small tag with the twine added onto it, so it kind of just dangles there. You can add foam tape or glue behind it if you want, but I kind of just left it. So I'll do the same thing with the vampire and then the Frankenstein. So that's pretty much going to complete the tags, but I am going to embellish each one. For the Frankenstein, I'm going to add the Trinity Stamps ladybug spots. I'm going to add 3 of those onto the sky area. And then for the vampire, I think I use the ladybug spots, and then for the skeleton, I'll use the silver rhinestones again. I add 5 to this one. I'm trying to keep 2 odd numbers here. And then the vampire, I think I add 3 ladybug spots. All right, so that is going to officially complete the projects that I created today. If you haven't guessed the movie yet, I've said it a couple times, it is Frankenstein, but I will accept Dracula because the vampire. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I really love this Tim Holtz monster set. I love the entire collection. You will be seeing some more of his dies coming for the future videos. So thanks again so much for watching. If you haven't yet already, please subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye!